Most people hear Strait of Hormuz and think one thing: oil, tension, news alerts. That's fair. That's what the headlines trained you to think. But here's what nobody tells you. Somewhere in that same narrow strip of water sits an island so visually strange, so geologically impossible, that explorers across centuries risked everything just to reach it. Marco Polo, Portuguese war commanders, traders from 3 different continents, all of them drawn to the same place. A place with no rivers, almost no farmable soil, summer heat that makes the air feel like an open oven. And yet, people built something here. Something that has lasted for centuries. Something that the modern world, with all its technology and comfort, still hasn't figured out how to replicate. The mountains bleed color: iron red, sulfur yellow, salt white, deep violet. The coastline looks like it belongs on another planet. And underneath all of it, the cultural depth of a community that learned to live beautifully in conditions that should have broken them. This isn't the Hormuz they show you on the news. This is the one they never bother to. This is Unreal Hormuz. The coral reefs. Here's something that should not be possible: coral reefs. Living, thriving, biodiverse coral reefs, growing in water that hits 96 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. That's not a slight temperature stress. That's a death sentence for coral. Everywhere else on the planet, water that hot triggers mass bleaching events. The algae that corals depend on for food and color abandon them. The reef dies. It's well documented. It's happening right now across the tropics, and it is catastrophic. But around Hormuz Island, the reefs just don't die. What happened here is that over thousands of years of brutal thermal cycles, the corals that couldn't handle the heat died out. The ones that survived passed something forward, a biological tolerance to extremity that their descendants carry today. It's not magic. It's just evolution doing what evolution does, slowly and without mercy. The result is a reef system that marine biologists treat as genuinely important data. If we need to understand how coral can survive a warming ocean, and we do, urgently, the Gulf's reefs are one of the few places on Earth where that question has already been answered in living tissue over millennia. These reefs also feed people. Over 700 fish species aggregate around them. Coastal fishing communities have organized their entire economic lives around where those reefs sit, where the fish gather, and what the seasons allow. The problem is that adaptation takes thousands of years. Oil spills don't wait that long. Tanker traffic, coastal construction, military activity in reef zones, these pressures are compressing what nature took centuries to build into a window of a few decades. Survival, it turns out, is not permanent. It's conditional. Hera Mangrove Forest. If the coral reefs are the Gulf's most dramatic ecological story, the Hara Forest is its quietest one. Along the southeastern edge of Keshem Island, 30 square miles of mangrove grow in water so salty it would kill virtually any other plant on contact. The Hera trees, Avicennia marina, solved this problem the hard way over millions of years of trial and error. They pull salt in through their roots, process it through their system, and push it back out through their leaves as visible white crystals. You can actually see the salt in the leaves if you're close enough. The tree is doing chemistry in real time, right in front of you. From above, it looks like a dark green maze laid flat against the water. From a small boat moving through the channels, it feels like the forest has closed behind you. The canopy blocks the sun. The water goes quiet. Birds moving between continents rest here in the branches. Species from Central Asia, East Africa, and South Asia, all passing through the same narrow channels. For the fishing communities that work these waters, the forest isn't scenery, it's infrastructure. The mangroves create the exact nutrient conditions that shrimp and juvenile fish need to survive early life. Without the forest, the fish populations of the broader Gulf shrink. The fishermen have understood this relationship for generations, not as ecology, but as practical knowledge. You take carefully because taking carelessly means less next season. That kind of inherited restraint is genuinely rare, and it worked for a long time. What's changing it isn't local behavior. It's oil from tankers that pass through the strait. It's water temperatures rising fast enough that the trees can't adapt. It's the increasing frequency of extreme heat events that stress the root systems that everything else depends on. When a nursery collapses, the consequences don't announce themselves immediately. They show up years later in fish populations that never recover, in communities that quietly go hungry. The Hara Forest is the least photographed, least discussed, and possibly most important ecosystem in this entire region. Hormuz Island and the Strait 18 square miles, 5 miles offshore from Bandar Abbas. Summer temperatures that make shade feel like a luxury. Hormuz Island shouldn't attract anyone, and yet it has drawn empires, merchants, explorers, and armies for more than 1,000 years. Not despite its harshness, but because of where it sits. The strait at its tightest point is 21 miles wide. Through that gap, roughly 21 million barrels of crude oil move every single day. That's 20% of the world's oil supply passing through shipping lanes barely 2 miles wide in each direction, surrounded by some of the most geopolitically tense real estate on the planet. The supertankers moving through those lanes are the length of 4 city blocks. They move slowly, carefully, guided by pilots who treat the passage not as a symbol of global power, but as a technical problem: currents, draft depth. The alertness required when the margin for error is measured in meters. Meanwhile, the island above those lanes bleeds red. The geology here is unlike anywhere else. Salt dome tectonics pushed minerals upward through 570 million years of compression, and erosion did the rest. What you see now, bands of iron oxide red, sulfuric yellow, pure white salt violet, isn't paint. It's the planet's interior exposed and oxidized and left out in the sun. The locals call the iron-rich clay galak. They mix it into a sauce called surak. They press it into flatbread. They trade it down the southern coast as a seasoning. The same earth that colored the landscape ended up in the food. That's the thing about Hormuz that takes a minute to absorb. The people here didn't relate to the island's extreme geology as something to survive despite. They folded it into their culture, their diet, their identity. The harshness became the material. The strait carries oil and global anxiety. The island carries 570 million years of geological memory. And somewhere between those two things, a few thousand people have built a life that draws from both without being consumed by either. Qeshm Island. Qeshm is the largest island in the Persian Gulf, 87 miles long, salt-scarred, wind-polished, and built for a kind of human endurance most people never have to develop. In summer, temperatures regularly pass 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity coming off the Gulf doesn't just make it feel hotter, it makes the air feel physical, like something pressing against you from all sides without asking permission. The island doesn't fight this. It reorganizes around it. Life here runs on a different clock, not the hour, but the heat. Before sunrise, when the air briefly loosens its grip, the island wakes up fast. Fishermen are already on the water. Markets are already busy. Everything that needs doing gets done before the afternoon arrives, because when it does, Qeshm stops. Not laziness, generations of accumulated intelligence about what hours belong to humans and what hours belong to the sun. By evening, the island comes back. The activity that was compressed into the morning releases again, more intense for having waited. Houses here are built with walls thick enough to hold the cool of night into the afternoon. They face the northwest wind. Water has been managed with a discipline that outlasted the original scarcity that created it. Everything on Qeshm is a response to something the environment demanded, and the result is a culture with no wasted energy and no wasted anything. Laft Village and the Badgir Towers. On the northwestern shore of Qeshm, the village of Laft looks like it grew out of the rock rather than being built on top of it. Coral stone and mud bricks stacked close together, rising toward a skyline broken by tall vertical structures with open tops. These are the Badgir, wine towers. Some of them are over 1,000 years old. Here's what they do. The exterior air in summer can hit 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not survivable indoors without some way to move air through a building. The wind towers solve this with no electricity, no machinery, no moving parts. They catch wind at roof level, like where it's slightly cooler and faster, and channel it downward through internal baffles into the rooms below. The result is an interior that runs 15 to 20 degrees cooler than the outside, passively, continuously, for free. This is not primitive technology. It is completed technology. It was iterated on and refined over centuries by communities for whom getting it wrong meant heat death, not inconvenience. Laft also has 366 ancient wells, like one for each day of the year, managed in a rotation system so that each well was drawn from only once annually. In an environment that generates almost no fresh water of its own, this was the difference between a permanent settlement and an abandoned one. The level of systemic thinking embedded in this village, in the architecture, in the water management, in the orientation of every doorway and window, is not folklore. It is engineering. Long, slow, empirical engineering built from the ground up by people who had no margin for error and knew it. The Lenge builders. In the boatyards along the coasts of Sheshem and Hormuz, men are building ocean-going wooden boats using a method that exists nowhere in writing. The Lenge is a traditional Persian Gulf vessel, UNESCO recognized, capable of carrying cargo across open water, constructed using knowledge that lives entirely inside the bodies of the men who build them. No blueprints, no specifications, no manuals. The curve of the hull, the angle of the keel, the placement of each structural rib. All of it passed from father to son through watching, doing, and feeling the wood respond to pressure until the response becomes instinct. These boats were designed for the Gulf specifically, its depth profiles, its seasonal wind patterns, the shallow coastal waters that larger vessels can't navigate. The Portuguese documented them being built in the 16th century. They're still being built today by the same method. For the men who build them, this isn't cultural performance, it's a trade. The boats are meant to work, to carry weight, to handle storms, to earn a living. The crisis is quiet. International maritime safety standards now require certifications that traditionally built wooden vessels struggle to obtain. Economic sanctions have reduced the commercial routes that made Lenge building viable. The knowledge doesn't disappear all at once. It thins craftsman by craftsman until the number drops below what's needed to teach the next generation. By the time it registers as a crisis, it's usually already too late. The women of Hormuz. On an island where the sun reflects off salt water hard enough to damage skin over a lifetime of outdoor work, and where centuries of Indian Ocean trade brought cultures from across 3 continents into sustained contact, the women of Hormuz developed a form of dress that stops people cold the first time they see it. The garments are dense with embroidered color, deep gold, cobalt, crimson, worn in direct contrast to the more muted inland dress traditions. Above it, the burqa mask, a structured face covering of embroidered fabric or leather that covers the nose and eyes while leaving the lower face exposed. From outside, it looks like pure tradition. From inside, it started as pure function. The Gulf sun, reflected off salt water, creates UV exposure severe enough to cause lasting skin damage over years of outdoor work. The mask developed as a practical barrier for the most exposed surfaces of the face. Over time, the form became codified, the pattern and construction of a woman's burqa, communicating her marital status, her regional origin. In some communities, her family lineage. A piece of sun protection became a social language. The practical became the personal, and the personal became the cultural. What's disappearing isn't the object, it's the literacy. Younger women in coastal towns increasingly choose alternatives. The craftspeople who produce the masks are fewer each decade. The knowledge of what the patterns mean, how to read them, how to make them, that's the part that's going quiet. What looks from the outside like aesthetic tradition is often from the inside a technology of survival that accumulated meaning over centuries without ever losing its original purpose. Kumzar village, Musandam. On the Omani side of the strait, set into the dramatic fjorded cliffs of the Musandam Peninsula and reachable only by boat, sits a village that developed something almost no other settlement on Earth has ever produced: its own language. Kumzari is spoken by a few hundred people. It is built from fragments of Persian, Arabic, Portuguese, Hindi, and several other languages accumulated across centuries of contact with sailors, traders, and empire representatives who passed through the strait without stopping. Every civilization that moved through these waters left vocabulary behind, The people of Kumsar absorbed it, shaped it, and built a spoken tongue from the wreckage of everyone else's passing. In linguistic terms, Kumsari is a fossil record of the Gulf's entire commercial history, compressed into the daily conversation of a single small community on a cliff above the sea. Every summer, when temperatures in the enclosed bay rise past the point of habitability, the entire village relocates together, all of them. They've been doing this for centuries, a collective seasonal migration that has preserved both the community and the language that might otherwise have dissolved into the broader regional dialects long ago. The current threat is familiar. Younger Kumsaris move to cities for work and school. Modern connectivity, when it reaches isolated places, tends to dissolve what isolation preserved. Language is not just communication, it is a record of every contact, every trade, every power that moved through and left a mark. When it goes silent, all of that goes with it. The Strait of Hormuz, by any reasonable measure of comfort or stability, should not sustain what it does. A waterway too narrow for the weight it carries. An island too mineral strange for normal agriculture. A sea too hot for the coral growing inside it. Communities too isolated, too exposed, and operating under pressures too large for any single generation to have chosen. And yet, they produce something. A language assembled from the ruins of passing empires, architecture that cools stone buildings without a single kilowatt, a food culture drawn directly from the geology underfoot, knowledge of the sea so precise it never needed to be written down. The world is moving into a future defined by heat, by water scarcity, by the collapse of systems that were always more fragile than they looked. And Hormuz, this narrow, salt-scorched, impossibly colored edge of the world, begins to feel less like an outlier and more like a preview. The people here didn't start preparing when the crisis arrived. The crisis was always the starting condition. They built everything they have inside it. The question this place leaves open, quietly, without instruction, is whether the rest of us are paying close enough attention to notice. This is not a story that ends at the strait. Across the world, there are places shaped by the same logic. Places that always knew stability was never promised. Places that are still here. And this journey has only just begun.